Where's the clapperboard?
I think we've all done it. David, can I ceremonially present to you the Breakthrough Paradigm Award for, what year is it, 2016? There we are, it's in this box somewhere.
Thank you. Wow, it's heavy. Thank you very much. This is a real honour.
Look at that.
Crikey. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Everyone knows about you for your work on energy, and I think that's probably what brought breakthrough in your direction. It's just this amazingly transformative book you wrote called Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air. That's how I found out about you. Can you just give us a sense of your career? That you went from mathematics and you were doing software engineering and all these amazing things, and then suddenly you ended up writing this book about energy.
Yeah, so originally my main research interest was how brains work and how to make machines that are useful, a bit like brains can be. So it'd be a nice ambition to have computers as smart as cockroaches. And I spent most of my career working on communication systems, learning algorithms, software to help disabled people communicate more efficiently, so you can write in any language with any muscle. But I worked in a physics department, and so I taught physics, and I found myself perpetually irritated by what people were saying about climate change action and energy options. And so on the radio, people will be saying, oh yes, we waste energy, and people have done a survey of British energy waste, and lots of people leave their phone chargers plugged in. And as a physicist, that drove me crazy to hear them be so out of proportion, not understanding that the phone charger is absolutely tiny compared with other things like transport, heating, food, the style of food we eat, the energy footprint of all those things, which are so much larger. Did I say flying? And then I was teaching in Africa at a place called the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, and all the students had to give little presentations, 5-minute presentations on a topic they were interested in. And one student gave a presentation about climate change and climate change action. And then this Polish lecturer, who was one of the other staff at this institute, piped up at the end of this little 5-minute talk and said, oh, this is rubbish. The talk had been about how we can use renewables and so on to take climate change action. And he said, that is rubbish. Even if we covered the whole Earth completely with solar panels, we wouldn't be able to power humanity. And I said, well, that's wrong. And then I was a bit embarrassed because I didn't know by what factor he was wrong. I'd heard Mary Archer give talks about the future potential of solar power, so I knew solar power did have, it was bigger than humanity's consumption at the moment. But I was embarrassed because I didn't actually know by what factor. And so that day I then said, okay, I've got to sort out my embarrassment. I'm irritated, I know people are talking rubbish, but when I tell them that's bullshit, then I don't actually know, I haven't got the numbers myself. So let's work out the numbers. And so he was wrong, and famously people say over and over, oh, the amount of energy hitting the Earth in 1 minute is blah blah blah, bigger than humanity uses in a year or something like that, which is true. But actually the ratio of 1 minute to 1 year is not that big a factor. It doesn't give you much room for manoeuvre. So the actual ratio of human consumption, I like to do it in watts per square metre because that's something you can transfer to cities and countries and so forth. So human consumption worldwide on average is about 0.1 watts per square metre of land area, and incoming sunshine in a place like this is 100 watts per square metre on average, and the global average is perhaps more like 200 watts per square metre. So the ratio of 200 watts per square metre to 0.1 watts per square metre is just a factor of 2,000. So yes, sun is enormous, it's enormously bigger, it's 2,000 times bigger. Now, is 2,000 times bigger actually enough that you can say, oh yeah, so it's all going to be easy? Well, no, because if you say, actually, it's unrealistic to solar panel the whole of all the oceans, so you've lost a factor of 3 there, maybe, if you say, okay, let's just stick to all the land. All the land? No? Maybe we want some of it for agriculture. Yeah, maybe some places are inconvenient to put the panels on. And maybe some people actually want to have things like Grand Canyons and the Tetons and beautiful places, and maybe want nature to carry on existing. So you can't just solar panel the whole Earth. And so once you start being a bit realistic and say, okay, maybe we'll allow ourselves to solar panel 10% of the land area, and the actual efficiency of the solar panels is only going to be maybe 20%. But the moment you put in these just simple arithmetic, simple bits of realism, then you realise actually it's a pretty close thing. If you want the sun to power humanity, yeah, it's technically possible, but you're having to use really large areas. You've got to build something really big. So I wrote a page then at this Math Institute, and it was called Order of Magnitude Morality, and it was the sort of first stab at thinking about arithmetic and how we live today and how we could live without fossil fuels. And then a friend, Matthew Bramley, read it for me. He was working for Greenpeace at the time, and I'd focused on solar. And he said, well, why did you focus on solar? And the reason was that Mary Archer had given a convincing talk that had led me to assume that solar was the basic thing to focus on for the post-fossil fuel option. And he said, oh, look at all the other options as well. So then I did that, and I came back to Cambridge and I taught some courses, some lectures, where I just went through options one at a time, and I did back-of-envelope calculations and put everything all in a single set of units, and it turned into the book. So I put everything in kilowatt hours per day per person, and it was just amazing to actually work out the numbers. And I wasn't trying to bias anything. I just, each class we would say, okay, let's draw the coastline of Britain, measure how long it is, estimate how much wave energy is coming in, let's make estimates of tidal energy, let's look at rainfall, and you look at every one of these potential sources of hydroelectricity and wind and so forth, most of which are coming from the sun originally. They're just some third-hand ways of collecting solar energy. And again and again, when you started by saying, well, what's the fundamental limit of what's the actual physical flow of energy that's available, and then you put some reality factors in to say, well, you can't get all of that, can you, because that would destroy nature and would require sort of turning the entire country into a hydro facility or whatever. You put in some realism. And then what kept on coming out again and again was, if you have a sort of optimistic but realistic view, each of these sources for the UK, I reckon, could give you maybe, if you pushed, 2 kilowatt hours per day per person. And it just kept on coming out like that. The wind, it seemed credible to me that if you pushed hard at wind power, on average, you might be able to get 2 kilowatt hours per day per person. Tidal power, really big programme, hundreds and hundreds of square kilometres of tidal facilities, another 2 kilowatt hours per day per person. And it was 2 and 2 and 2, and all of these different renewables were coming out. That's just what popped out. And I found that just really striking. And our current consumption in the UK and in typical developed countries is 125 kilowatt hours per day per person. In America it's 250 kilowatt hours per day per person. And arithmetic says 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. It's not 125, and it's not 250 either. And there's this appalling delusion that people have that, oh yes, we can take this thing which we're currently using to deliver 1% of all our energy, and we could just scale it up. And oh, if there's a slight issue of it not adding up, oh yes, we'll do it energy efficiency, because oh yes, I've heard you can have energy harvesting devices on your body and generate energy and charge your mobile phone charge. There's so much delusion, and I think it's so dangerous for humanity that people allow themselves to have these delusions, that they're willing to not think carefully about the numbers and the realities and the laws of physics and the realities of engineering. So the book was born out of anger and the feeling that humanity really does need to pay attention to arithmetic and the laws of physics, and we actually need a plan that adds up. And it isn't just the land area issue, which I bang on about quite a lot in the book, that's one of the themes, but there's the intermittency issue as well, that people want energy in a modern society when they want it, and so you've got to have supply and demand matching. And again, there's a new delusion that's spreading through the world at the moment, which is, oh yes, solar is coming down in price, wind is coming down in price, and batteries are coming down in price as well. and just people seem satisfied with these simple statements that the prices are coming down, so it's all going to be fine. But they haven't done the numbers to think through actually how big the batteries would need to be if you wanted to do a solar and batteries only solution. There is this phenomenon called winter, and in some places, it's a real thing. In Britain, the average intensity of sunshine is 9 times smaller than it is in 9 times smaller than it is in the summer. Winter is 9 times darker, and so the size of batteries you actually need for this magical free solar and free batteries, you need just absurdly large batteries. And what actually needs to happen to the price of the batteries for that to become a realistic option is they've got to come down by a factor of 100 or so.
Have you read the Eco-Modernist Manifesto? How do you feel about eco-modernism as a sort of idea?
Personally, I do like the Eco-Modernist Manifesto, but if it's a polarising thing that stops people having constructive grown-up conversations, then I'd rather not take a public position. I'd rather say, let's carry on using arithmetic, having grown-up conversations, building a consensus. I think the Eco-Modernists, I think it's a very sensible outcome for that consensual conversation. But the most important thing of all is to try and keep everyone participating in a consensual numeric conversation based on things like the global calculator.
Because being numeric is just the first step. Then you have to actually decide what you want your priorities to be, and that comes down to values and politics and political economy and things like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I genuinely would be content with any plan that adds up. Having spent 5 years in government, seeing how difficult it is to get some types of policies through, seeing how important money is and cost is, I now have views about what I think would be a good outcome. But if I were to nail my colours to a mast and say, okay, I advocate this solution, lots of this, a little bit of this and none of that, then the way human dynamics works is you lose the trust of a whole load of people, because they'll just say, oh, he is, they've done this to you, you're pro-nuclear, you're being paid by the nuclear industry, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. So I've always tried to avoid advocating particular solutions, but maybe the time is coming that I should also call a spade a spade.
Well, come on, tell us then. What would be your ideal plan? What kinds of things do you want to see more of, and what kinds of things do you really don't want to see?
So it's always country specific. So for the country of the UK, I think we want a zero carbon solution, and it has to work in the winter. And now if you just follow the logic through and you say, okay, I've got to have something that works in the winter, and what are the choices? I'm focusing on the production side here. Of course we'll do all the demand reduction, that always should be said, but on the production side, how can you make your energy? Bioenergy requires enormous land areas. We're going to have some of that probably. There's nuclear, there's carbon capture and storage, there's wind, there's solar. The wind and the solar are intermittent. The solar's timing is not well matched to demand in this country. And if you just cost optimise and say it has to keep working in the winter, even if there's no wind for 7 days at a time, and obviously no sun, you can allow yourself interconnections to other countries that may be having similar issues. You can have storage solutions, but you just cost optimise it. And the sensible thing to do for a country like the UK, I think, is to focus on carbon capture and storage, which the world needs anyway, and nuclear. And then if you ask, well, what's the optimal amount of wind and solar to add in as well? The answer is going to be almost zero, because if you can make it through the winter with your CCS and your nuclear, getting through the bits of no wind.
That's the highest demand, the winter, of course.
That's the highest demand. And so then there's actually no point in having any wind or solar, because if you built them as well, that's an additional low carbon source, which is, I love them. I love wind turbines. I've got nothing against wind power. They are the cathedrals of the modern age. But it's actually a waste of money if you have got a low carbon solution that gets you through the winter when there's no wind going. It's a waste of money to then build some additional beautiful wind turbines just because when the wind blows, you're going to either have to turn those wind turbines down or turn something else down that you've already paid for, like the nukes or the CCS. So that's my feeling of the actual rational thing to do in the UK, and that is based on political value judgments, which I don't have to hold are right, but that's just my feeling of the way the British public is, that they do seem to care quite a lot about the cost of energy, so we should be looking for a low carbon solution that is low cost. If people had different values, if they said the way the Germans seem to be, oh, we don't care what our energy prices are, it's fine for them to go up by a factor of 10, then maybe you come up with a different attitude, that you say, yeah, price doesn't matter, let's have the country be filled with wind turbines and with storage facilities and spend lots of money on storage. But the scale of what you're requiring, we're talking hundreds of flooded valleys to be able to balance the intermittency of the wind.
But if you go on the radio in this country and say, "Oh, we shouldn't do any solar," then you've broached a terrible taboo, and you're
yes, yeah. And to the credit of the civil servants who I worked with, when I went to government, I may have indicated that they had some bad policies, but when it came to whether solar should be in the mix, they'd done all the numbers. They'd done the numbers for that already, and solar just wasn't on the table at all. And the only reason that solar got on the table was because of democracy, that the MPs wanted to have a solar feed-in tariff, and so in spite of the civil servants advising the ministers, no, we shouldn't subsidise solar, we ended up having this policy, and there was very successful lobbying by the solar lobbyists as well. So now there's this widespread belief that solar is a wonderful thing, even though it's highly intermittent, mainly produces energy in July, and in December produces 9 times less than it does in July. Britain's one of the darkest countries in the world. So that's my answer for Britain.
In Australia, you might have a very pro-solar answer.
Absolutely. So anywhere where you've got a correlation between solar and demand, then it definitely looks like solar is going to be a really, really, really good idea. And batteries are cheap enough that you can store energy overnight. And so a solar plus battery solution in a place like Las Vegas, I can definitely see playing a large role. Society still needs reliability, though. So society stops functioning if we don't have a reliable electricity system going all the time. And so for a place like Las Vegas, you're still going to want other technologies in that mix as well. So I advise Las Vegas to get itself a nuke, for example. And the world needs carbon capture and storage power stations, because sucking CO2 out of the air and being able to carry on using fossil fuels
which is unfortunately going nowhere, and has gone nowhere in the last several years.
That's a disappointment. I was really hoping that the UK would be one of the leaders of development of carbon capture and storage technology for the world. All the models show that it is an essential technology if you're trying to make a cost-effective climate change pathway, partly because it allows you to carry on using fossil fuels, and partly because it gives you a way of making a vacuum cleaner for CO2 using sustainable biomass and putting it into CCS power stations. So that's why CCS is crucial. And the lack of progress is very disappointing.
Well, I don't want to end on a on a disappointing note, but give us a few optimistic things about what you think people who are watching this in this audience could work on and could be passionate about and enthusiastic about.
Well, as we've said, I think the global calculator is a wonderful tool. So anything that can be done to enhance that tool, to improve the way it communicates the information about trade-offs, a good piece of work that could be done to enhance the calculator could be to make clearer the environmental and sort of social impacts of climate change. At the moment, the levers allow you to make choices in the energy system, and it shows global temperature consequences and rainfall and various other things. And I think there could be far more graphs visualising over the future centuries impacts on land flooding and maybe bringing home the increase in the effect of increases in droughts and floods, and then that tool could be a more helpful decision support tool to help ordinary people understand the choice between action now and adapting and suffering in the future. So enhancing that calculator is a
and getting people to use it more, presumably.
yeah, yes. What else?
Get CCS off the ground by the sound of it. Not something we can do ourselves, but
Yeah.
if you think that's an essential technology that we really can't do without, then it's important to say that, I think.
Yes.
I think people are beginning to just think, oh well, that didn't work, and let's look for something else. But
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are definite areas for positivity. I think electric vehicles are going to be a massive hit, just as people switch from old cassettes to modern iPods. I think people are going to discover that electric vehicles are just great, and maybe hybrid cars, plug-in hybrids, will give them a transition so they have a bit of security over their range anxiety, but they'll discover that they're using an electric vehicle almost all the time, and so that's going to be a very positive development. So I'm delighted how the book has been helpful, but I'm also still irritated that these delusions about the easiness of getting by with a bit of demand reduction, a bit of renewables and a bit of batteries, I think there's still a lot more to do.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who gets drunk next to you. And if I haver, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who's havering to you. But I would walk 500 miles an hour